Topic today is phenotypic plasticity in response to non-genetic factors, specifically in hymenopteran and termite caste development. Over what we're going to talk about. First, we want to talk about our study group. Who is it that we're studying? What organisms are we looking at? Then we're going to go over the thesis. What is the purpose of this presentation? What are we trying to learn? We're going to go over castes, what they are, and how they're formed, and also what that tells us about evolution. And then we'll conclude with what we have covered, what it implies, and what we might look into in the future. So first, we need to define a few terms. The first of these is Hymenoptera. Now, Hymenopterans are a group of insects. It's the order of insects, and it includes some that you'll be familiar with, such as this one, which is a wasp or a hornet. It also includes the ants and the bees. So if you see a wasp, an ant, or a bee, you know you're looking at a Hymenopteran. And they're grouped because of similarities in their structure and where they came from, where they evolved from. We're also going to be using termites as one of our groups for the study. Termites are not in the same group, they're in the Isoptera group, but they have many things in common with Hymenopterans, including social structure, caste types, and abundance. So, what are we going to look at? This states that Hymenopterans are good models for phenotypic plasticity in caste development, and that by studying this caste development in Hymenopteran and Isopteran groups, we can gain insight into the evolution of social societies, and that by understanding those groups, we can both understand evolution and also apply the knowledge to current human practices for our benefit. So what is a caste? A caste is a specific set of individuals which have a certain task. So there's one caste that does one task in the colony, and another will do a separate caste. So it's like a different kind of job. And here we see that there are several groups. So we find the ants on the upper left, and those are all the castes within this particular group of ants. You can see that there's a great variation in size and shape, but they're all the same group. They're the same species. Same with the middle, which is the honeybees. There's 3 different castes, and they vary in size, similar, but they vary in size, and they also do in their task. Termites, on the right, have many different castes and shapes, and then also we have given an example of a wasp here, and they also have 3 castes, and it's basically just size that they differ in. So first we need to understand that all of these groups, for every species, everyone has the same material to work with, the same genes or genetic code. So if we're going to see all these castes, it must mean it's a difference in phenotype. So just like we have this clay here, and let's say that's every individual has a set of clay, and it's the same, they look different and perform different tasks. Like pottery, you can make clay into many different tasks, and you made it out of the same stuff, but it performs a different function. So Hymenopterans and Isopterans, which are termites, have social groups. They live together in these large numbers of individuals, and they work together in order to survive, which means they are both not getting eaten by predators, and also that they pass on their offspring, their genes to their offspring. Over here on the left side, we have a paper wasp colony. A group of individuals as a collective is called a colony. So all the members of the colony of all castes will live in this one structure. In the middle is a termite mound where their colony exists, and on the right is an ant mound, or also called a nest. So there are several castes that exist in these groups, and we're going to go over them one by one. On this page, you see the reproductives. On the left is a termite queen. She's a reproductive. Her only purpose is to produce members for the colony, and she's the only one who will produce members for the colony. And around her are workers and soldiers and other castes. Right, you see an example of one of the reproductives in a honeybee colony. This is the drone, and his job is to mate with the queen. He actually mates with a bunch of queens, and that's pretty much his only purpose. He later dies. And it varies in the groups whether or not the males stay within the colony or whether they just mate and then die. Next, we have workers. This species is probably familiar to you. It's a honeybee. The workers are responsible for gathering resources for the hive and caring for the young. Soldiers are responsible for guarding the colony, whether it's at the actual colony site or when they're foraging looking for resources, they're going to protect the other members of the colony. Now, both of these are workers. One is bigger and one is smaller. They're called major and minor workers, but they both have the same task, just a difference in size. Then there are scouts in some groups, particularly the ants. They go and look for resources for the colony, such as food or water, and then they communicate it to the workers who can come and gather it. So castes are determined in several different ways. The first of these is dominance. So dominance can be achieved in two manners: through aggression, so physically intimidating other members of the colony. So the queen usually would be the one who would do this, and she would be walking around and making sure the workers aren't having offspring. The other form that I think is much easier is preventing the development of the reproductive system. This is done by a release of hormones from the queen, which actually prevents reproductive structures from reaching maturity, so the workers cannot actually even physically produce young. Another way castes can be formed is spatial relationships. So cells where they're reared, such as, a honeybee cell in a hive, can vary in size. The larger size would be for the queen and the smaller for the workers. Or cells could just be placed differently in different areas so that the workers know, okay, this section, these are going to be queens, and this section over here is workers. So it's just varying in placement, which communicates to the workers how to treat them. And this applies to many groups. We just use bees here as an example. Nutritional factors can also influence what caste will develop. Honeybees are a particularly good example of this. Honeybees administer royal jelly, which is a different food source, higher in nutrition, to those larvae that are destined to become queens. Without this, the proper reproductive structures cannot develop fully in the young. In addition, the quantity of food has an impact on caste development. So the greater the quantity of food, usually the larger the organism. So the workers that we saw earlier with the two ants, one of them was most likely fed a lot more than the other, even though they're the same caste. The quality of the food applies to the royal jelly. Royal jelly is a very high quality food and gives the resources necessary for development into queen. Now, the timing of the food is also important, as there's a certain time period where the caste can be determined. And after that time period, it may be too late to change what they're going to turn into. There are also pheromonal factors in caste development. So we talked about one earlier in the dominance where you can inhibit the development. You can stop something from developing, such as reproductive structures, and that means that you'll be the queen and the others will have to be workers. Or you could simply control the behavior of the workers through the pheromones. When you're present, they know that you're the queen and they can't make any more or else they'll get in trouble. Seasonal changes also have an impact. For example, a starting bumblebee colony starts with one individual, the queen, who has mated the previous season, and she lays a few cells which will become workers. Once those workers are developed, the queen no longer has to gather resources for them. The workers will then be responsible for raising the young, while the queen simply produces the young. So depending on the time of season and the number of workers available, the offspring that are produced are going to vary in number and in their role in the colony. Also, as winter approaches, males will be kicked out of the hive as they don't offer any help with the colony except for mating purposes. So how did castes begin? How did they evolve? Well, Wheeler said in his paper, written in 1986, that a difference in size was probably the first factor in caste development. And a good example of this is the honeybees. Here in the center, marked in green, is the queen bee. She's a lot larger than these other bees around her, the workers. So even though they look very similar, they're different sizes, and that could have led to the development of castes. So we can learn more about evolution if we look at the common ancestor of hymenopterans versus modern ants. So the common ancestor of hymenopterans had wings. It basically looked like a mesh between the three different hymenopterans. That slender body, the jointed legs, and also wings. Now ants, as we all know, live underground. And since they live underground, wings would not be helpful to them and would actually be harmful because they would be cumbersome and they would increase the probability of being eaten because they might get stuck in their tunnel or on their grass or something could grab their wings. However, having wings is advantageous in some circumstances, such as reproductive events, when you want to disperse and find a mate. So, even though they don't always have wings, and rarely do, they produce winged individuals when it is advantageous for them, which is interesting. So, termites and wings are an interesting area of evolution as well. Termites, like the ants, have some individuals who have wings and certain periods of time where there are winged individuals, and otherwise they don't have winged individuals, as it would be counterproductive. However, they don't let their wing structures go to waste. Instead, they evolved into a new function for their wings. So they have exocrine glands that form where the wings would normally form and from the genes that would normally form the wing structures. Exocrine glands are used in pheromone production, and as a result, the termites are able to communicate. Termites are almost entirely blind, except for those individuals who go out to disperse. So this is a really important evolution for them to be able to communicate through pheromones using a structure that was originally intended for flight. So how can we apply this knowledge? We can study the evolution of social groups. So how did they evolve? Are there different levels of sociality? There are, ranging from simple to complex. And by studying them, we can hypothesize how social groups evolved from simple to complex. Pest control methods can be developed. For example, if you understand termite biology and how they function, you can use another pesticide that affects what lives inside of them in order to eradicate the termites themselves, because they can't survive without their symbiont. So this is how you could apply some of that knowledge. Also, there are ecological applications. Termites, while not really positively viewed when in human structures, as they can cause millions of dollars of damage, within their natural habitat, they are important for recycling nutrients so that there's not as much buildup, which results in less fires, which can be good for the environment. Also, hymenopterans can increase the yield of crops. Honeybees have been of particular interest in the recent years, as they aren't doing very well. By understanding how their casts develop and how they function as a whole, we can increase the yield of crops and possibly save the honeybee from further diminishing. In conclusion, we learned that hymenopterans are good models of social structure, caste development, and evolution. We also gain an understanding that hymenopteran and isopteran biology can be used to benefit human processes through pest control, benefiting agriculture, ecological benefits, and even food. Some people eat termites, especially in third world countries. When they disperse, there are large termites produced, large male reproductives, and they eat them, and it provides them an important protein source, which they wouldn't otherwise have. Also, we have opportunities for further resources of evolution and greater understanding into how hymenopterans evolve along with isopterans, and how we can apply it to biological concepts and also human practices. Thank you for your time. Have a good day, and farewell.